Well, my parents are sitting in the third row over here, so I just needed to name that before we start anything. The reason I want to name that is because preaching about your parents is one thing, but preaching about your parents when they're in the third row means something else. So here goes nothing. But one thing that my folks did very, very well for me and my sisters was we got to know our grandparents really well. It wasn't like Christmas, Easter only we'd go and see Grandma and Grandpa, but at least a couple times a month we would be seeing them, interacting with them. And so Dad's dad, Grandpa Myron, who has since gone to God, but one thing we remember very fondly about him was he is like the most gullible person you will ever meet. He was the most funny when he wasn't trying to be funny. His jokes were awful dad jokes, but then when he's just living his life, we're like, he is so funny. So one day me and my siblings got the idea, he really liked grapes, and so we got some olives, and we took the grapes off the vine, and we put the olives on the vine, brought it out, and so Grandpa starts eating these, thinking that they're grapes, and he's like, oh my gosh, these are the worst grapes I've ever had. And he just kept eating them. You know, like he didn't even think twice, he just ate whatever we put in front of him. And so we remember that very fondly. But I think something beautiful to reflect on in that story is how that would apply to us. I think there are certain things, certain thoughts, feelings, desires, truths, or lies that we consume whatever's put in front of us. So for example, I'm very, very happy to be a priest. It's the best 2 weeks of my life, actually. I love being a priest. But as I look back on the early days of seminary, there were many, many moments where I would be hitting roadblocks. Huge discouragement. I can't do this. I am so unworthy of what I'm being asked to do. Because I was learning more and more and more about the beauty of what the priest does, and simultaneously seeing more and more and more how I'm not there yet. I'm really far from that, actually. And there was this deep lack of confidence. I was just eating whatever was coming to me. Spiritually speaking, I was just eating the olives. And I'm like, oh, these are the worst grapes in the world. Just keep eating them. So I met with my spiritual director once, and typically I would go in every few weeks, and I would just talk about, this discouragement and this unworthiness, and he would be like, okay, kind of smiling a little bit. He's like, yep, totally unworthy. Yep, totally. Which was actually really lighthearted. But one time when I was going down this litany of unworthiness, this is a couple years ago, he cut me off and he said, Ryan, who's talking right now? I kind of stopped. And he's like, I have a question for you. I'm like, okay. He's like, so when you read the news, are you particular about what sources you read? I'm like, you know your spiritual child. Yes. He's like, would you ever consume fake news? I'm like, no. He's like, so why are you consuming spiritual fake news? Why are you eating whatever is put in front of you? Who is speaking to you right now? It's not the Lord. The Lord's voice is not a voice of discouragement. The Lord is not an accuser. The Lord is not trying to rob us of confidence. And so what I want to propose to us today and what our readings speak of is we need to be aware that there are different voices in the spiritual life, in our interior life. And it's so freeing to know that. I mean, imagine you're in a war and you don't even know you're fighting it. You don't even know who the enemy is. But when the lights come on in the room, it changes everything because we can accept the good. God's trying to speak to us. And we can reject the bad. Actually, that's garbage. It's fake news. It's olives. That's not grapes. There's beautiful, but we don't need to live on autopilot. And so these three voices, listen to this today. In Genesis, we hear about Adam and Eve. They're eating of the tree. They fall. They sin. I think their experience is common to everyone in this room. But what is the responsorial psalm? What is the response to that sin? With the Lord there is mercy and fullness of redemption. The response to their sin was not, Adam and Eve, you stink, you're the worst. Accusation. But it was actually this, come home, get up. With me, with the Lord, there is forgiveness. There is freedom, there is mercy. The Bible actually talks about the God of Israel being gentle. That is not at all what the accuser would say. And then in the second reading, therefore we are not discouraged. Our God is an encourager. He certainly is a challenging God. So I'm not making it out to be all, unicorns and rainbows. But what I am saying is if you are hearing the voice of discouragement, hang up the phone. It's not God on the other end of the line. Our God is an encourager. His voice speaks of peace, the scriptures say. And then finally in the gospel, we get a little bit of insight into the bad spirit. The world, the flesh, and the devil. It says that he is a divider. He brings division where he goes. Heaviness, discouragement, accusation, confusion, anxiety, temptation, shame. One distinction that we talked about at the women's retreat earlier this year was the difference between shame and guilt. And I think we've brought that up also too in homilies, but it's something we need to return to. The evil one speaks in shame. You are your sin. Your failures, that's who you are. And you just feel awful. There's no hope. There's no peace. It brings you down. Compared with the Lord's voice who says he may bring guilt about, gosh, yeah, that fall that we had in the garden, it's unfortunate that we did that. I'm sorry. I don't want to do that again. Did you notice there that the sin wasn't put upon me as my identity? But I actually had the hope of wanting to be made new. Those are the different voices I'm talking about. The voice of the evil one versus the voice of the good spirit, of the Lord and his angels. And so my encouragement for us today is to be aware of who is talking. This is why prayer is so essential. If we do not have time to listen and to reflect, we're never going to be able to look back on our day and say, gosh, I think I was eating olives all day today, and it tasted horrible. Lord, I'm coming back to you. I don't want to eat whatever's put in front of me. I want to consume the voice of peace, of gentleness, of joy, of faithfulness, self-control, love. The Bible literally lists those as the things indicating to us that God is present. And so my brothers and sisters, let's listen to those voices. Let's discern who is speaking, and so that we can grow ever closer to our God.